Here comes the Nastygram.
Send a priest to save my soul, forget it.
Welcome back to the Nastygram RPG podcast. This is our wrap-up episode for our second arc, Into the Storm. Stick around here next week for a little peek at our coming arc, which will follow immediately in a very, very different setting. We will be entering the Star Wars universe with Empire's End. But for now, let's talk about Into the Storm.
Sleeping mouth, I apologize for these transgressions. Wish I could say that I learned my lesson, but the bottle she's calling to this sickness that...
So I guess that wraps up our first Dungeon World game. I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys, get a feel for what you think of the system and the game in general, and maybe your characters and all that. Oh, yeah, we're cracking drinks open now.
Cracking drinks!
Oh, yeah.
Fuck yeah. Celebratory.
Yeah.
Celebratory seltzer.
This is a 12-ounce can of Dom Perignon.
I really enjoyed running that. More so, I mean, I like running games. I run a lot of games, but more than a lot of the other games I've run in a very long time. Just from my perspective, it was just a lot of fun. I don't know what you guys thought, but and part of it is definitely on you guys. Like, you know, awesome role playing throughout the entire thing. But I felt like the system really lended itself to me at times being able to kind of take a back seat and be a spectator to the way everything was unfolding. And I thought that was cool and different from what I'm used to in like D&D, you know?
Yeah, I mean, from a gameplay standpoint, I think it does definitely lend itself to building story and having the characters and players be more involved in building the story, which I think always is a better thing.
Yeah. And I think listening back to it, probably the further we get into the arc, the more I kind of let the reins go and let you guys kind of take over, establishing more of like, you know, well, what does that look like? Like what you tell me what you do instead of me tell you what you do, you know? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a hard, I don't know. Part of me says this would be a harder system for like a first timer playing.
Yeah,
but maybe
definitely.
not. Maybe if you don't have any, I don't know. It does put you on the spot a little bit more, but
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I haven't been playing, you know, role playing games as long as you guys have. I like this because it lets you make more choices, whereas D&D has more rules. Like, I want to cast a spell. Like, okay, well, it's a verbal, somatic, and, you know, okay, I have a black pearl, and I wave my hands around, and I mutter this phrase, and I cast. Instead, it's like, I get to make up whatever the fuck it is I want it to look like. Like, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think, though, like, part of that, even though I think you're right that as for newer players, I think it's not necessarily challenging. It's more on the DM that it would be challenging. Jake's got, 30 years of experience. Not to call you out, but
well, I think
28. Come on.
I think it could be challenging for a player. Let's say you've only sat down at a game table a couple times, and then you're like, all right, here's the rule of this game. All right, I attack the thing, and the DM's like, all right, cool, what do you do? And you're like,
right. Yeah,
I'm not a swordsman. Like, I don't, like, you know what I mean? Like, unless you got to get the hang of it a little bit.
I think that in terms of, it would be better with a DM that is more veteran who can guide those conversations and not necessarily require players to come up with things on the spot. So if you're a experienced DM who is introducing new people to the game, I feel it's easier than D&D just because of the lack of rules. It's easier to just jump into the story or jump into your character because you can just pick a couple things and you're in it. And then you get to ask some, the questions of guiding the characters and bonds are pretty straightforward and simple, and they can spark conversations. And you can, if you're an experienced GM, you'll be, guiding those conversations along and being, okay, well, ask pointed questions like, oh, why do you believe this? Or, X, Y, Z.
I was curious, Jake. Were there any decisions or choices that we made, given the flexibility of the system, that you were not that you weren't happy with, but kind of not even unexpected, but kind of really forced your hand in one direction, and you were okay with it? Or was there enough flexibility in the system that you feel like you could kind of work around some of the decisions or choices we made?
You know, there were things that I didn't expect that made the game early on move in a kind of a different direction. Like I didn't really, and looking back, it seems stupid, but I didn't really see you guys ending up on that first island, White Sands, where you had to take over the enemy ship, you know, like, so it was kind of neat because that wasn't planned. Like I didn't expect you I didn't expect the enemy ship to become your ship, and which led to an entire game of kind of investigating, learning about the mystery by investigating their ship.
Admiral Purrington.
Yeah,
most important
and the
character.
invention of Admiral Purrington. So like, you know, all of that came about because you guys decided to take over an enemy ship. So yeah, there were things I didn't kind of plan for initially, but I was always in every case happy with how it ended up. Mm-hmm. At times I actually worried that it felt too on the rails. But I think with Dungeon World, it really wants you to learn as you go, you know, discover the story together. So I was a little concerned about making it too on the rails. But you guys are good at kind of disrupting my plans. Like, you know, I thought you were going to fight all the soldiers when you were at the keep and Sapush found out that they were on their way. I was like, oh, this is going to be a cool, like, you know, preparing for battle and, you know, fixing the fortifications and stuff. And you're like, nope, let's go.
Let's go rescue a snake.
Cool. I like it, you know?
Yep.
And the snake is a great example of like, I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. I love giant snake fights. Always got a giant snake fight when you're in the jungle. But, and that was what I was kind of planning. But then you guys just rolled so well on all of your like survival, defy danger stuff that it ended up being a way different scene, but it was still a cool scene, you know?
Save the snake.
So
I feel like the giant snake is that same. What is that story about the giant spider in all the movies? You know, like the director.
Wild Wild West. Dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
there's giant. If you're in an environment that can justify a giant snake, there's going to be a giant.
Well, we fought a giant snake at the end too.
You
Like,
did.
God was a giant
That's
snake.
true. That's true. Yeah. Did you guys feel like you kind of had the freedom? Like, did it feel like too guided?
No.
I don't think so. No.
No.
No, I think inherently, like I think we're very flexible with what we call one shot. Basically, a one shot is any like I have a conception of like a beginning, middle, and end, and it's, you know, our one shots can end up being whatever this was, 12, 13 episodes,
11.
yeah. But you know, it was kind of like it's a one story kind of thing, and I think there's an element of not being on the rails, but like kind of knowing to some degree up front what the task is. But in this case, we didn't, because, you know, we didn't talk at all about what this game was going to be. It was just, we're going to play Dungeon World. We had a session 0 built characters, and you didn't even say, like, you're just like, yeah, you're going to be on this thing. And so part of it was like revealing over time the scope of things. Instead of just going to this fort, it was like, you know, there's the supernatural shit that happened along the way, the weather, and then, you know, kind of scaling up. It was kind of a fun way to do ending up being a pretty epic scale for a quick story, but never felt on the rails, I guess, for your question.
I think too. We've talked about this. We as a group have played campaigns that have lasted for years. Same characters, you know, played them for 2-3 years at a time, and that's weekly. So that's a lot of character development. And what ends up happening is that just in terms of character development and growth, I think characters get kind of different allegiances, whereas something like this, it's much more streamlined. And we as a group of players are just kind of more settled into just propelling the story forward and having fun with it, versus I think when you really start to get into the nitty gritty of world building and character development, you can sometimes get into the weeds of which way you're going, and it can be more fractious and all that stuff.
So speaking of characters, I'm curious of how you guys feel about the characters you played. It seems like everyone really kind of felt like they jumped into these roles quick. Like, that's one thing about a one shot is a lot of times it takes you a while to figure out how the character is going to be. I felt like you guys got that really fast in this. But I was just curious what everyone thought. Like, are you happy with the choices? Like with the character, like, having played Dungeon World once, would you have done it totally different? Like, what do you think of everyone else's characters?
I really enjoyed playing a kind of different take on a barbarian, a more, a more, I don't know. It's a strange character that I enjoyed, because the cool part about being an outsider is, you get to make up your backstory, and you get to build in, all of these. You can kind of be the voice of the listener as well, of being like, why is this happening, or does and you can add exposition. So that was interesting for me. But I did like playing Ariad. I think it was a little different. I think because I don't really play like barbarian.
Yeah, you don't play
all.
the big fighter guy.
No. So I don't know. It was fun. And I definitely love the system. I think the only thing I would say is I feel like the progression, like picking a new skill, isn't as exciting as it is in a lot of other games. The moves can, especially for the barbarian, aren't great to pick. So I felt like my level ups were kind of boring to some extent. But
Matt, sorry, Josh.
Quick aside, I think that's one, not even a critique, but just a point. It is such a simple system that I think that's a universal thing. Like, to be honest, we're all pretty active role players, like a combat can be really fucking boring in this system if you don't take advantage of the storytelling aspect of it. There's just not that much to do when it comes to like rolling. Like if you just like, what actions are you doing? There's not a lot of shit to do.
If you don't take part in that narration as a player, then it's going to be pretty boring too.
Yeah.
So yeah, John, your character is way outside of your normal character, and Josh, I think yours was too. Like Sapush, you were saying earlier, like you don't play that kind of silly. Are you happy with?
I had a blast. It was
Sapush was great.
I mean, it was probably one of the most fun I've had playing a character for a while. And it definitely, like the way that they made this character sheet, like what the druid is it's really boiled down. It's not like a D&D druid. It's much more like you're basically just a shapeshifter and you're in touch with nature. And it sort of was like that's what gave me the inspiration to be like, I'll just be like this weird, ambiguous, like nature spirit kind of guy. And then I just we did the session 0 that helped. And it was like, oh, make it kind of almost alien-ish, like Dan, you mentioned, like Drax in a way, like yeah. But yeah, I had a blast playing them. It was a lot of fun.
Cool.
A little goofier than usual for me, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think, Matt?
I liked having kind of a bromance too. That was kind of fun, just to like sort of off screen, just say like me and this one character have this really tight bond.
It seemed to happen kind of naturally, where there were a lot of situations where I was pairing you guys up, and it was often Sapush and Kyle, and then Ariad and Helios. And I kind of realized that afterwards. I was like, oh, I keep doing that. Like I keep putting them in twos, and I'm not. It just worked for some reason, but. Yeah, but you all had really good dynamics amongst each other. Like you all had cool little things going on between each other, which was really neat. Yeah.
Now, have you ever played a cleric before?
No, this was the first time I've played one. It was fun. I liked the, I always kind of hear clerics are like it's super boring. Like you're just a heal machine and you don't really do anything. But I think that was, like I was saying, I like Dungeon World because you can kind of make it how you want it, instead of like, oh, it's lay on hands. Like I touch you for 4 hit points. Like and I mean, it's probably pretty obvious it was the first time I played a cleric, because I would like, oh well, yeah, I'm gonna heal Helios, and it's like, oh man, I could have described that way better. So like, I think it's definitely, I would definitely want to play again, and I would like to try to play a cleric again, or even try it in D&D to see how it feels.
I think Matt, I think you had a lot of actually some pretty cool scenes that you described casting differently. I mean, from
The dead captain was amazing.
That was
when you
fucking
raised
cool.
the guy with the smoke from your pipe was awesome. There was you blew like a raspberry when you were checking the lock for
yeah.
magical. So I think overall, like I think we all have little moments where we're like, oh, we could have probably described something differently, or because we have so much flexibility with this system. I think you're always going to have moments like that. But overall, I think it was pretty awesome how you approached it.
For me, as the dungeon master, it was always easiest with Kyle Black to figure out, like, what am I going to do with this character? Like, that was like, I would sit down to think about, like, the next session, and I would always start with Kyle because it always seemed obvious. Like, okay, cool, he's going to have this, vision where he's at like a party and speaks to Dio. Like, for some reason, like, I mean, and it's a testament to the character just being really solid. Like, it was always kind of where I led when I was thinking about writing the game. So yeah, I mean, even it's funny because you like, yeah, all Kyle really does in a fight is heal everyone. I mean, that's valuable, but it's those role playing moments that really drive it more than anything.
And I feel like no matter what, you always run into those ruts where you have a skill or an ability that you use a lot. It's kind of your main thing, and it becomes hard to change it up and describe it differently.
Right. Or to justify going outside of that.
Right.
Yeah. You're like, I do 14 damage with my sword.
Yeah,
Why would I assist?
And maybe this should be a given for most good systems, maybe, but like I would say I want to play Sapush again because I want to role play him again.
Yeah. Yeah. Not necessarily
really because of the mechanically
Right.
interesting, or he's going to get more like I said, like John was saying, leveling up. It's like, yeah, I mean,
it's not like in D&D. A lot of times it's like, oh, I really want to get to level 13. So I
Yeah.
get these abilities.
Right.
But you're like, oh, I want to play this character because I want to play this character, not because I'm looking at
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so I would definitely want to play Sapush again, but unless we were playing the same group of characters, I would be more inclined to just like, oh, let me try the next playbook. Let me try the next
Right,
playbook.
right,
Like it's
yeah.
a little bit more versus D&D. I don't know if it's the mechanics are a big part of it, but you have a little bit more of that investment in like, I want to get this character.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's true of any role playing system that your character has to be dynamic enough and have enough depth and dimension that you want to keep playing the character for sure. But I kind of get kind of both points, what you said, Josh, and then what you said, John, too, about leveling. One thing I noticed, Dungeon World versus Monster of the Week. One thing that I think maybe gives Monster of the Week a bit of an edge is that it really allows a little more flexibility in customizing your character anyway, because it usually allows you to take moves from other playbooks. While Dungeon World does this with
A little
some
bit,
classes, but usually it's
very
very
specific.
specific.
And you only
maybe,
get one,
Maybe there's a
usually.
balancing reason because
Yeah.
of that.
And every playbook in Monster of the Week, you pick your things to start.
Right.
I think everyone in Dungeon World, your first level is set.
Correct.
Every first level druid is.
I had some picks, but it was whether I'm I have no armor or I'm armored.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or
there's
am I
very few
Herculean?
choices to make it level 1.
I mean, well, Matt played a cleric. He had some cool like flavor stuff, but I don't think it was as mechanically oriented at first level, like the stuff you're picking about your domain and shit like that, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I do get.
Like describe it.
I think cleric in Dungeon World. As you guys are saying that, I'm looking through the cleric like spell list, and some of this stuff sounds like it would be a lot of fun at the higher levels, like Mark of Death and Sever, Control Weather, Words of Unspeaking.
That would have been useful.
It's funny playing the Immolator. I mean, it's pretty on brand for me to play an Immolator.
I was going to say, like, this is a traditional Dan character. Back in the day, you had
Nexus.
You had Nexus, who was a
Fire
sorcerer
Ganassi.
who did all fire stuff. You
Yep.
know, yeah. This is right in your wheelhouse.
The one thing that is different about it is that the way that the immolator is primarily described is kind of like almost like an imp or like a devil or a demon. Like a lot of it
Mischievous?
Yeah.
has
Or-
like hellfire stuff,
Right.
and a lot of it is like. And I've actually read about how
Yeah,
other
like a
people play
warlock.
them. They just light everything on fire.
Yeah.
Which I did anyways.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, that's basically what my skill set boils down to. But they're very they can be very difficult or antithetical to a group. Is
Yeah.
one thing that I read about them, and that we were talking about this in the beginning of the game. That I may be only able to play this for one shot, and then
That's it.
it's too much.
Yeah.
But I felt like overall,
No, it was. I feel like it. You rode that line of you are sacrificial, or you do you do burn things on fire. But I think in general, Helios is someone who can work with a party. I don't think there was ever an issue with.
It also helps that there was, we start from the get-go, we had common ground and only
Yeah.
got stronger.
right.
And I think that's between the system and these characters. I think it is part of the system that I think this system trends towards a one shot better. It's just more fun. Slip into a new playbook, slip on a new set of clothes, try it out. Fun, boom. You don't get tired of the abilities.
Yeah.
Something like the immolator, which, is very much like a certain thing, or even like the druid,
Yep, sure.
I would almost say though that like to the point of first level being like a non-pick, basically. I think after playing Dungeon World, for this long, and being the fact that we've role played forever, I think we could now go back and say there are moves that we can just take out and replace with things that we make up, or as instead of just player progression or just the mechanical skill or level progression, maybe there are times where skills no longer make sense or moves no longer make sense for your character, and you remove them and you replace them with others that are more geared to your role playing or something that happened as your character. I mean, maybe it's an immolator thing that you lose because of this, or whatever, or you gain because of this,
Sure.
and changes.
Yeah, I like the bond thing, the mechanic too. I mean, we use that. That was part of the thing for one shot, and I don't think I'll ever run a game where I don't have some sort of mechanical bonus for story driven shit, whether or not it's in the system or not. It's just like it's such a no brainer to have a ability to mechanically reward for good character driven role playing.
I think
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, kind of on two paths. When we were talking about group cohesion, I think bonds lends itself a lot to that, because you're being rewarded for kind of fulfilling relationships within your role playing group.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's huge, and also I think some credit is due obviously to Jake creating moments in the stories that allow us to kind of
To do that.
reinforce those bonds and kind of move forward.
I
So-
think a lot of times in any role playing game, the role playing is directed at the GM and not at each other.
that's a good point.
And I think the bonds really help give you that, like, and I feel like for me, I didn't do it enough with Kyle. Like and the bonds reflected that. I didn't resolve really any bonds with Kyle. So I think thinking back on it, I could have done a better job of having a role playing moment of going over the Dio, or maybe he gives me shrooms or whatever, and we go on a trip together. Whatever it is, like
That's a great point. Yeah.
That kind of sticks out to me,
I did want to, like, I'd kind of thought of some sort of thing that we could do to try to resolve that bond, but the story didn't exactly lend to a lot of like, hey, let's chill out for a couple of hours and
It's pretty
discuss
fast-paced.
theology. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, and maybe that's the problem with the bond, is it was more of a theoretical, or more of a like you said, sit down and talk about theology. maybe there is something more direct that we could have had. As like there's a specific thing that you show me the power of Dio. Maybe you don't convert me. Maybe we don't learn whatever, but maybe through action you show me the power of Dio, and that what would complete that bond and would be a good role playing moment.
On the other hand, think of it this way: we just played one arc. We use stock bonds, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think for all of us, for the most part, we did fill in the blank bonds. So, I mean, I don't think at the beginning that I knew that Sapush and Kyle were really going to hit it off.
Sure.
So I think in a way, like, you're only going to get so much, like, it would almost be unnatural to try to evenly build all your, like, it's kind of nice that just they're there and then you see what kind of naturally happens. Like Sapush and Helios had the same thing. Like we didn't have a ton of interaction, but I think part of that is just letting what naturally feels right.
Yeah.
Cool. So, like I said before, this for me was such a fun game to run. Like I've never been as excited to like get back to the table as the DM as I was for this game, really in a long time. It's funny because, I picked up the Dungeon World book kind of on a whim and I was reading it and I was like, yeah, it's different. Like the way that you're supposed to kind of write a game. I was like, I kind of want to give it a shot. And, going into it, I wanted to do it the way the game is meant to be played. So I didn't really flesh out a ton of the details. I had this idea in my head. I mean, a lot of the inspiration for the whole idea of the way the gods were and the way they lose power, comes from like, the Sandman comics, like that whole universe,
awesome.
like, where the gods are in a way, like, they're like people, but more powerful. And they literally like, if you stop praying to them, they're forgotten and they don't exist anymore.
Right.
Neil Gaiman does a lot with that. He did that
Absolutely.
with American Gods. too.
Yeah. So that's kind of, a lot of his writing is where that concept came from. But I always, like Josh had mentioned, like it became a pretty epic storyline. And I have been trying in my older age to steer away from those because I feel like it becomes too much of a Marvel movie. The fate of the world depends on it type thing. But I felt like it worked. What do you guys think? Or how your characters fit into that? Or
I definitely think it worked because, to some extent it was an event that needed to be resolved or else a lot of people were going to die type thing. But I felt like it was localized enough that it didn't necessarily feel as epic as it probably would have been had it got to like Belakai or something.
Yeah.
And I feel like that allows you to have this big bad, allows you to have this problem that is time sensitive, but also doesn't mean that we have to have this epic showdown of it in the capital with soldiers running around.
Going into this, I was like, I don't want to create a giant geography and a bunch of kingdoms, and I don't want to have to give you guys a list of NPC names. I mean,
have Dan do it.
How many NPCs were in this game? Like,
I thought about that too.
Captain.
Yeah.
so few. And it's hard to keep doing that. I mean, it's part of the reason it was fun to run, I think, is because so much of it was kind of, I can sit back and let you guys talk to each other because there's not a bunch of NPCs having conversations with each other all the time, But yeah, I did definitely intentionally want to scale it back in that way.
It was the smallest epic story I've ever played in a role-playing game.
Yeah.
Like, in a good way. Like there were essentially 4 settings, two named NPCs, and then the end of the game was killing a god.
Yeah.
Like it was the small scale, super zoomed in, and yet this kind of big thing that was fun. Like normally, like to have a game like that, which is also the kind of games I gravitate towards in general. It's like, okay, you kill this pirate captain. Like that would be the whole thing. Cause
right.
I'm like older now and I want like gritty fucking whatever stories. So then the other question is, when can we stop doing arcs that involve a group of heroes fighting a scaled demigod creature on an archipelago? Like, what? Fuck.
Well, behind the curtain, we're both writing these two games at the same time.
I know,
basically. So it's
but
it's
also
hilarious.
separately. Like,
yeah. What do they call that? Like when two people invent the same
Zeitgeist?
thing?
Yeah.
we sort of collectively came up with the background of One Shot, the
Right.
main principles, before we even got far in this story.
Right.
How much as a GM did you continue to follow the Dungeon World, way of doing things? Did you have fronts and
The
dangers and all that?
So I actually kind of abandoned it pretty early and then went back to it because I realized that I wasn't doing it, and I think it's a good guideline.
Yeah.
And I think it is a great thing, especially for newer DMs. But I mean, so the first game, the first thing on the ship, I was like, cool, the storm is going to be a front, and I had all the portents written out and, very by the book. And I was like, oh, great, that worked awesome. And then I stopped using it. It's a good system. And honestly, I think I stopped using it just because the story started telling itself.
Yeah.
I stopped using it because I
Right.
was like, oh, all I have to do is sit down and say, this is happening. What do you guys do? And then you
for
guys take it
an
from
hour.
there. Yeah.
Well, I feel like the good thing about that system is it does force you to think about what are the motivations of X and what would happen if that actually went through step by step. And it gives you opportunity to insert story into those steps.
Yeah.
And it's a good way of building an idea. Maybe it doesn't have to last that way, or it doesn't have to always exactly go down that list. It can just be a guideline for that.
Yeah. I did it for the first scene and I did it for the last scene.
So Dungeon World is powered by the Apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so. Going back to that question of whether or not, how little world building you did and things like that. Like Monster of the Week, the whole built into that title is, is very much like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's very episodic in that way, and I think that Dungeon World is similar, and that because of how it's stylized, you don't really have to be bogged down by the story like you are in some of the other systems. And I mean, obviously it shows. And to John's point, localizing our heroics, so to speak, not sitting in court trying to parlay, with different kingdoms as to what we're going to do. We were very much left to our own devices, which I think was smart on your part. And it allowed us to just play out the story, which is awesome,
I'm curious how a very different, what would one of our little intriguey shenanigans-ish kind of in a city fantasy games, how would that go in Dungeon World?
I think it would have to be way more kind of like murder mystery than intrigue, because intrigue often requires information at the core. But then again, I guess you could
Make 'em
improv
up.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
But that is really kind of spontaneous in terms of how it evolves.
I mean, even in a lot of our old D&D, Regdom games, we would play games and not roll die. So I mean, that ethos of role playing through the story and only rolling a die when you absolutely have to, I think that would still go into that, but it would be probably less improv-y, or Jake would have to have the portents and the fronts all written down a bit more strictly because you'd have to be able to reference it.
I think you can think of it more abstractly and think of those, you can think of those portents as being, this diplomat sends his guards out to the courtyard can be a portent,
Right.
So I do think that if you think of it that way, it can work. I mean, we played D&D 3.5, we played a courtly intrigue game for 5 years or something crazy with low magic, with the worst possible setting for that. I mean, system for that setting. I think at the end of the day, Dungeon World is what you make of it. And I mean, it's very open ended. Like, defy danger. It's roll with the appropriate attribute.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it can work for that kind of setting. I do.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, not to step on your toes, Jake, but did everybody have like favorite moment or moments or like any regrets, anything they wish they had done differently as a character or whatever?
All perfect role players.
I know there's definitely some moments where I wish I hadn't set things on fire. So, I mean, thinking like being a little more dynamic because actually the Immolator has a couple of really cool social talents, like social powers, I should say. But because we didn't have very many NPCs, there wasn't a huge opportunity to work on a lot of them. And I'd actually mentioned some of them to Jake if we had more like FaceTime with
Admiral Pryington.
Trinos.
3 named characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
3 main characters. So I think there's a couple of moments where I wish I hadn't defaulted to that. But like you said, once you have a skill, it can sometimes be hard to think around that.
When you have fire, everything looks like wood.
Yeah, right. But there was actually a lot of really cool moments, I think, throughout the game in terms of different characters, different opportunities. But I don't know if any stand out to anyone else.
I asked you, fuckface.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I mean, and we don't even have to go around in order like anything that jumped out to. I mean, for regrets, I'll say one. If anybody's thinking of good moments or personal regrets, not even a regret, but I had kind of gone into the last combat thinking like this might be Sapush going out on this one. Maybe that's a cool ending because I think I was viewing it as like Sapush, like kind of viewing that he really shouldn't be alive anyway. Now that this was kind of like
Borrowed time, and how much can he really do against this thing? And it just didn't end up like really being necessary. And then, the dice fall where they may, but I was like, oh, maybe I'll be in this bird form. And then if things look really bad, he'll fly into the throat of this thing and turn into a panther in its throat. Amazing. That's amazing.
Amazing.
Nice.
And again, not like I wanted Sapush to die, but like, hey, it's an arc game.
Yeah.
Like it could have been cool for him to go out at the end.
I kind of feel the same way about Kyle. That whole scene with Dio and the like, basically me saying, well, like give half of the followers. Like as Kyle, I was like, well, fuck, man, like I don't want to get you any more followers. Like I don't want that to happen. So like, I guess that was kind of a thing I put myself into. But like. In that
was a
final
bold
scene,
choice.
I was like, if Kyle, I think at this point, Kyle probably would sacrifice himself to save the others and like kill Trinos and be okay with it.
I think one of the other moments that I really liked too, which wasn't even one of mine, was when Sapush and Father Black went off to figure out. They ended up figuring out that the waterfall was the way in.
Oh, that
and
was
it was
amazing.
the first time that you used your new ability to commune with nature. And there was just a really cool moment, like with the silver in the water. That was really cool. I liked that a lot. And it was actually that same game. There was an interaction. Speaking of breaking into twos, I was with you, and you were talking to me of your home world, and I think the whole concept of Helios has kind of been in this war between Bellakai and the Furions, and the whole that there's just everlasting peace with your people.
Right.
Was a really cool character kind of moment for Helios.
I loved all those moments where Jake didn't do his fucking job and just put it all on us.
Yeah.
Like there were so much good shit came out of that.
Yeah.
Like all those God scenes,
Yep.
in the afterlife, like, like Helios was perfect. And, when John was doing his, it like really tied together of like, it just, cause you're kind of coming to like all the shit you've kind of thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we sat down with this massive like overarching background of our characters and our
I had
motivations.
at least 10
and,
pages written.
Well, yeah, not all of us.
you
That's
know,
it?
so like it was coming, like, you know, Matt's the only one that had kind of a name god up front and like a whatever, but just through the process of playing the character, like more came out of it and like what Dio's personality is like. And I felt the same way, like with Sapush of like, yeah, it would be fucking David Bowie from Labyrinth. But then like this whole thing where like, of course, like Death wouldn't be a bad guy for him.
Yeah,
It would
it's
just
just
be
another
like
one.
Right,
the
right.
other part of it. But yeah, all those moments where I think those were the best moments where Jake set up a good situation to put people on the spot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys think those scenes went well? So let me tell you about that part. So, and it kind of goes into a slight regret as well. So, between games 9 and 10, that was kind of a weird transition because the end of game 9, you guys fought the guards in the tunnel and you used the explosives to block them off so they couldn't come get you. But you guys got real fucked up in that fight.
Yeah.
And then Matt had an epic series of rolls where he failed to heal everyone. So it was this weird spot where, you know, we ended game 9 and I went home and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? They're like 20 feet away from the final boss. And
They're half dead.
they can't go fight him. They've got 8 hit points collectively. Like, and I was kind of thinking about it and I'm like, you know, that's the thing with D&D is it's like, oh, we just sit down and take a rest.
Sure.
I'm like, that would be so cheesy. Like it would be so anticlimactic. And, you know, part of me is like, well, I don't want to force it in one direction. I don't want to like put it on rails. I'm like, but I got to kill them all. So,
But they're all gonna die.
but I kind of wish that I had maybe talked to you before the game started, like when we started session 10, because I know you were all kind of like, what the fuck? We're not going to just go in there and die.
Yeah.
So that was a little awkward. And I kind of should have been, I don't know. We should have talked about it maybe out of game a little bit.
Josh
and
is
been
going to edit it so it sounds like we were all very decisive and knew exactly what we were doing.
Put some fucking music in the background.
yeah, it was a weird sort of transition there.
And it's hard starting any cold start. Like when you first sit down into a session, I feel like I always take a little while to warm up.
Yeah.
So that was like a high pressure kind of the only on the rails moment that I really felt like, and I kind of hadn't gotten up to
Warmed
speed.
up, yeah.
But
I think we're also very spoiled in that usually we get to play the same game every week, you know, in and out, and we've bounced around a little more
yeah.
than we have in the past. So
Yeah.
Yeah. But what did you guys think of role playing as your gods? Making the arguments. I thought you all did an awesome job.
That was cool.
And you know, everyone kind of came up with. I like how you all came up with really cool metaphorical locations and stuff like that. You know, it was all really awesome.
Yeah, that part, and that wouldn't have worked if we did that like 6 sessions earlier. Well,
Right.
not that it wouldn't have worked, but I think you got a lot more juice out of it because by the time we had to make these decisions, we've talked in character enough and we've given motivations and backgrounds and shit.
Yeah, you had to understand at that point who your characters were and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that-
I regretted not having sat down and figured that out beforehand so I could have practiced
your
a
David Bowie
voice.
accent.
'Cause it didn't work well. Whatever. Oh, also, I regret not practicing animal noises. After each session, I was like, fuck, I wish I figured that out. And then I just don't.
Then you watched YouTube for 2 hours later.
No, but I thought that there's just listening back too. I'm sure I'll remember a lot more of those character-driven moments that we had. I think that really kind of propelled the game and propelled the whole scene and the environment, which is really cool. That's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite episode is the one where you guys were on when you had first gotten to the Sea Witch and you were all kind of investigating the mystery in a way, like trying to figure out different stuff that was going on. And I did very little that game. Like I did no prep, like honestly, like, but everyone had like really cool moments. Like, you know, John had the cool moment where Ariad like swings through the fucking
window.
window, like as Helios is like pondering
Figuring
how to
out how to
open the
open the
lock,
door.
just smashes through, like swings through the window, and the speaking to the dead captain thing was
amazing.
awesome, and of
The
course
Admiral.
Dan making sacrifices and
Oh, yeah.
speaking with
Trinos.
was great because I mean honestly it worked out so well where you guys got all the necessary information to make that happen because that I hadn't really thought it was going to go that way. And of course Admiral Purrington and Sapush.
Yep, that was the
was
whole
great.
one episode.
Yeah, it was interesting playing a character who was more carefree than, it's tough for me to get into those shoes because I don't know. I'm just not that way. But yeah, it was interesting. Just any door, just run it over. Any enemy, just bash into it. Yeah.
Favorite scene or anything like that, Matt?
I mean, I really the Speak with Dead, I think, was the favorite scene that I did. That was a lot of fun to come up with, and it was just kind of on the spot, so that was exciting.
It's always so rewarding when you because and a lot of times the best moments come like really on the spot like that, like and it's always so rewarding. You feel like you a badass. Like, I just thought of that on the go. Yeah. Sorry. What? Anything else?
Yeah, I liked a lot of Dan as Helios. A lot of that's a lot of his sacrifice scenes and that kind of stuff. I thought were really cool, and also gave me, a good chance to play off of as well, which I thought was a lot of fun.
That was one of my favorites. Actually, was the scene where we all had to be a part of the sacrifice because it was kind of like the build up. And like it being a shared thing, I thought was a cool payoff, and it was shit a blood egg.
Yeah, right. It was great for me because it's funny. The session or 2 sessions before, I think I had leveled up, and the ability that I had looked at, there was a couple of abilities that I took just because I knew where the game was going, in terms of. Like
I did that same thing with that community
right,
thing.
exactly.
I'm like, I could figure this be a cool moment.
I think that's when I took the one that basically gives me the wizard ritual for a place of power. And so I didn't know how I was going to use it or what I was going to use it for. I had some ideas, but then that scene at the end, or that scene where we all kind of sacrifice something, got everyone on my level.
That was great. It really was an awesome like kind of build up to that final battle. That was cool. Yeah, good job, Dan. Good job writing that game.
Cheers. Yeah,
it's so true though, what you're saying, Jake, about like those little moments feeling so rewarding. I always think like my fucking dad plays golf all the time, and he's always like, all that matters is like you have like those 1 or 2 great shots. You walk off and you think about that, and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like that. Like when you fucking stumble over like a bunch of shit you're trying to say, and you fuck up like descriptions, but then you there's a couple moments in every session where you're like, oh, that was cool, like how I did that or said that or whatever. I was thinking of that. There was the ritual that Sapush and Kyle did together, and there was a couple things like, because the description is just on the spot, there's a couple things I said where I was like, oh, that was cool, like listen to it after. There was something about like how like Sapush was like exhaling and like the things were growing and like with his exhale and inhales. I was like, oh, that's neat. Just remember that and all the other shit.
Nothing
right.
else.
not when he's like, what does the hair sound like? And I was like, wrinkle my nose, wrinkle my nose.
The whole scene when you communed with Kyle and the mushrooms and the sparkly water, I was happy with that personally because like it was very on the spot, not planned out. When you said you were going to use this ability, like I've role played with you enough, and I understand how Sapush is. I was like, he's going to go down to the water. He's going to go fucking do it by the riverbank. I knew you were, and I that kind of got the gears rolling, and only a few minutes to think about it, and I was happy how it led to the silver on You know, I can just imagine Kyle like stoned out of his mind, like splashing in the water and like laughing about like the silver on his hands, you know? And I was like, so that was one of those for me that was just like an improv, like, but very rewarding at the time. Like, that is going to be awesome.
The scene that John and I had, where we were just talking about your homeland, I wrote Jake a nastygram. I was like, I'm going to give John 1 XP because, and that's what's great about the system, right?
Yeah,
like
you can advocate.
that you have a chance to like dig into someone's character and you're rewarded for it.
Yeah.
You know? So
Yeah. I mean, rewarded for pushing the story forward, which
and
is
rewarded
awesome.
for failure. Like that,
Yeah.
that's a great system.
which
Experience.
again pushes the story forward
Yep.
because some of our best moments were made because of critical failures you guys made, like that push the story in
Oh
in a
man,
cool way.
me trying to get across the ice. That was a
That
journey.
but that turned into a great scene, like with you guys kind of huddled together. Like, you know, it really, I think it was the first time that you all really kind of bonded and you
Yeah.
know,
and your
work
first time that
together.
you had to rescue
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean, like Josh
Yeah.
pointed out, any environment I'm at risk. The flood.
Right.
It was
I
the
was
first
drowning.
time to push snuggled one of the other party members. It's happened
or,
several
or,
times.
Was that
you
the
know,
last time?
the flood scene, because I had it in my head that like it would be cool to have something like that happen, but the failures were at the right times to make it happen, and it worked out really well. You know, yeah, the game, like, you shouldn't feel bad when you fail in this game. You really shouldn't.
John, did you regret your lack of sucking and fucking?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I regret. Well, there wasn't enough NPCs to suck in or fuck, so.
You've never.
I definitely. Well, I mean, to that point, I do regret not using or not actively looking at that power, because I didn't roll a D8 for a skill at once, and I probably should have, especially like when we were fighting the god. You know, that's fame and glory.
yeah,
you know?
getting the bloodlust.
It would have been
There wasn't as much opportunity for the other.
How does the mechanic work?
when you're rolling when you're pursuing one of your appetites and you would roll for a move, you can replace a D6 with a D8.
Oh wow.
But if you if the D6 is higher than the D8, then there's a complication.
When I gave you guys all like new abilities at the end there, I was trying to do something that wouldn't be unbalanced, but would also kind of help in that last fight. And I'd look through like the barbarian abilities. I didn't want to just give you more combat stuff because because Ariad is a monster in combat. I kind of expected you to try to discern reality when you got into like the eye of the storm.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe something else would have been more fitting. But as I was looking at the barbarian, I was like, oh shit, the appetite thing. We haven't been using this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just a new system thing too. Like you just kind of forget some of those details.
And I may have made up my own appetite at the beginning, knowing what I did. Because I think some of them they're specific enough where you can make up your own, and I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think, this whole game experience, we're all much more comfortable with it now. And if we went back into Dungeon World, I think we could easily modify bonds to be more appropriate and not use out of the book stuff, or modify your Herculean appetite to be more appropriate.
I just took a quick peek in the Dungeon World book at the bond section, and for moving forward for writing your own, because it's part of the system.
Right.
Basically, they kind of give the model of look back at a previous session and pick something important, and then write a bond that advances that
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. So nobody had played Dungeon World before, right?
No.
Nope.
You haven't? No. We played a whole arc without. I don't think we had physically had the book here once.
No,
Right.
yeah, no.
I know,
true.
Jake, like you said, you referenced a couple things for like, game prep or building the game initially or whatever, but that's pretty
Yeah.
nuts.
Amazing.
You mean every time we try to grapple in 3.5, we'd have to look up the rules?
Yeah, still.
Yeah. It's pretty easy. I mean, I read the book, cover to cover, but you don't need to retain a bunch of information off of it. The printout with the basic moves and your playlist is really all you need, and it's which is great. I mean, we talked so much about having the system take a backseat to the story, and it works well. It was a little hard. Running combats is a little challenging in this.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, I can see how it could be boring. It can be challenging as the DM to make it feel like there is always a threat. You know, like you want it to feel like it is dangerous. And I don't know how you guys felt, but a lot of times I felt like it didn't seem dangerous enough.
I might agree.
Yeah.
I never once, I think, had any concern that a character was going to die in a fight.
Maybe with those elite soldiers, because I was down
I
to
thought,
6.
I
but-
thought that was the only real moment.
But then I
thought-
started hitting, and then it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think that's as much on you. I mean, I think that's just kind of the system.
But what's also, I mean, death is pretty final in this system, I think, or not. I don't know. Is there like a lot of resurrecting? Or
Yeah, cleric has some stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's some stuff, and there's
Yeah, I have-
also
Like resurrection.
back your ass up with the resurrection?
I mean, maybe it was also just still the taste of the last fight, and that was just like mostly you guys putting out like crazy amounts of damage.
Yeah.
you know, we could have also, or I could have been better about, resource management is a big part of Dungeon
Yeah.
World. And initially when I read the book, I was like, oh, cool. Like I like the way equipment is this kind of abstract thing. Like you have 4 equipment and you use it up. And for like some of those mixed results, you're supposed to do stuff like that. And that can add a sense of, things being dangerous if you have limited resources and they get used up. I think it's something that I can get better at running Dungeon World. But for me personally, that was the thing I struggled with the most, was like making these encounters really feel like exciting and dangerous.
It probably lends itself to, because this has always been an issue for our role playing style too, is that if it were a dungeon crawl, if you made a lot more fight scenes in every one, it would probably feel a lot different. Because exactly to that point is at the end when we're having just fought the elite guards and we have no healing.
Right.
You were forced to kill us. Like, I mean, that's a pretty extreme situation. Whereas, I think if we had gone on to fight, we would have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance of like, let's do things that progress a story and make the story interesting, but also let's make sure the characters always feel like there is a tension and a danger, and it's hard to balance that, like the idea of like your character could die with let's make the story go in the right direction.
Right.
Those things can feel really opposed.
Do you think that the combat itself was, like, in terms of fifth edition combats, do you feel like is it just harder because we have to come up with interesting actions, or is it just hard? Is it harder because it's just inherently not as interesting unless you do that? Like D&D combat, is it more interesting than Dungeon World, do you think?
I think it's easier to make it interesting. Well, that's not true. It goes both ways. And D&D can become a complete mechanical slog.
Yeah.
But there is inherently more variety to D&D. There's more actions. There's more things every character can do. There's more spells. There's more, like, it's not going to make the combat more interesting. But when you look and it's like, all right, it's coming back around to push. There's like 3 actions you can take in combat.
Yeah.
So it's not the thing I pick is going to be interesting. It's how do I make it? How do I describe it to make it interesting?
But do you ever find that in D&D that it may be that you have more options, but how often do you just fall back on the same 2 or 3 things that you do anyways in D&D?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of times.
As the dungeon master, I find D&D combat. We just did a pretty long D&D game, and it started to get a little boring as a dungeon master because I feel like 5th edition, a lot of the monsters are just bags of hit points and an armor class.
Yeah.
And you have to get really creative to make those fights interesting. So, a lot of times I would go with the really wacky monsters like in that last game. So in a way it's very easy in D&D as the dungeon master because you just
pick a monster.
pick a monster and they whack at it. But Dungeon World has different challenges. You know, with any system, I think the real trick is to make it so that the fight isn't just we're standing there whacking each other.
Yeah.
There needs to be environmental things. There needs to be other stuff going on, like other threats or
Consequences.
other consequences, you know, stuff like that.
I think that's what you can take from Dungeon World, because you have to have that in Dungeon World, and
Yeah.
it kind of
You can add that.
kind
to
of programs it in.
Yeah.
Because if you have like here's the creature and you sit there, then it's super boring.
Yeah.
But like Dungeon World, I think like by the book tells you like, no, have
Right,
these
right.
different kinds of hard moves. And if you take that approach back to like
You
D&D,
absolutely can.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably something the next time I run D&D, like I will definitely take away from this experience is how to make a fight more interesting than just we're standing in a tunnel whacking the rust monster while it whacks us.
But I mean, to say that though, like one shot, I think all those combats have been pretty interesting in a 5th edition sense. But I think it's because you put them in different environments and in specific, you know, you have specific environmental issues, or the combats are different enough that it doesn't feel like random thugs A, random thugs
Yeah.
B. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, as kind of a different line of questioning, I wanted to ask if anyone had any, not a regret, but a curiosity as to maybe having taken a particular action or part of the story in a different direction. Is there something that you wanted to explore further? Like, I think, John, we gave the example of playing on the appetites a little more.
yeah,
I don't know if anyone else had any others. Like, there's also like a story question, for example, for me was that tribal elder on White Sands was like,
What's up with him?
Don't spill blood. And then we like annihilate all these people. A whole bunch of other people just ran into his jungle on his island.
yeah.
And we
What's
left
going
him
on over
there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there was that little that could have played out for a while
Absolutely.
on that island.
Yeah.
With a very strained relationship with the islanders.
We could still be on the island.
Yeah. I don't know if there was anything else like that that stood out to anyone that you could think of.
You know, thinking back to that part where the elder asked you, you know, told you don't spill blood on the island. The idea was going to be like, if you guys peacefully resolve your problem with this crew, he and his tribe will help you get to where you need to go. So you probably were going to take like fucking canoes across
Right.
the ocean, and you would have ended up on the ice the same way that you did. But you know, you wouldn't have had Captain Cohen and his crew with you.
Yeah.
Like which would have, I mean, changed the entire, you know, end
Yeah.
of the game.
we wouldn't have been able to investigate that ship or anything. either.
Right. None of that would have happened. Yeah.
no,
it would
Admiral
have.
Purrington.
Yeah.
No, Admiral Purrington. Right. I mean, we probably would have had a cool,
We would
like,
have been attacked by
Haval?
Haval.
yeah, no, honestly, you probably would have had a cool scene where you guys were in canoes on the open ocean and gotten attacked by some sort of monster, you know, but like, that's just a great example of like, no, you guys just went and murdered those dudes and it took it in a much different direction.
Oh,
yeah.
was the guy riding the back of the elephant? Was he like a badass dude that we never fought? Was he?
He was just, yeah, like the leader of like the soldiers. Yeah. Like just a badass, like,
I didn't know if like maybe he had like
their,
some
their
kind of.
captain or something.
But we never fought him. Did
No,
we?
we
He
just
wasn't
fought
one
a
of those?
couple of his
Nice.
peons in the cave. Right. Yeah, he didn't fight the elephant.
Were there any other artifacts that you had in mind, like in that room full of them, that we could have gotten our hands on? Did you have anything for that?
Oh no,
No?
not really.
Okay, cool.
No.
Did you have a specific idea of like, was there another druid in that island, or was it just you were just kind of personifying nature?
I didn't want to nail it down too much because I kind of didn't. I wanted to let you take the lead on that because we had talked about how Sapush. We had kept it really vague with Sapush, what he was and what the nature god or spirits or whatever were. You know, like we kind of intentionally didn't define any of that, and I didn't want to like step on your toes by defining it all. So I kind of wanted to just leave it really vague.
I like it, Bowie.
Yeah, like I didn't want, like it could have been the orangutan, or it could have been an unseen force, or the forest itself. I didn't want to get too in depth with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was awesome. Like I said, one of the most enjoyable DMing experiences I've had in a really long time.
Sweet.
So
What are you running next, bitch?
well, I was gonna say, do we want to? What do you guys think? I mean, I think you all like your characters a lot. Do we want to maybe try another game with these characters someday?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'd love to.
I'd be okay
I
with
think
it.
the setup is there.
Right.
But you don't do the Marvel thing because we just killed the gods. So now we got to kill like a whole pantheon.
Now
Well,
you're
there's
gonna
a-
fight a planet, right?
Well, he was a part of a society, so we have to go track down that society, and maybe that's more intrigue as opposed to fighting a god.
That's actually, you talked to me out of a game about this.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of suggested that my character had more involvement with these people who are killing gods,
Right.
which we hadn't even really got into, and Helios wasn't sure of. So, there's lots of stuff, lots of material there.
I would love to play these guys again. I'll have to like think about like.
If you want to do Saposh again, you think?
Well, I think I want to because he's fun to role play. I would just
How?
have to. I think he kind of views this as like done. Like he had that whole, like I said, going into that last combat, like borrowed time, like then get back to balance.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. Well, I like John, you nailed it. My whole thought was if we did continue this, it would be more of like, what kind of organization is Trinos part of? Like, getting to the root of them. And, are there other people that are doing this same thing? And, it's not over. He was just one of member of this like cult or whatever. Helios is the linchpin to connect that, because Helios is literally like, hey guys, we're not done because I'm still alive.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So yeah, I thought that would be cool, and maybe do something that's a little less of your typical kind of pulp adventure with 3 NPCs. To see how these
Flesh out
characters
a little bit.
see how these characters interact in a different sort of environment. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah. And I think for you, Josh, it could be more of, because what I initially thought when I had my meeting with the gods was that I was done after this fight. But Jake kind of clarified for me that I'd be done more when the cult or whatever this organization is, that might kind of fall in.
Or we can, leave it. There doesn't always have to be a sequel.
3 movies. That has to be 3 movies.
Yeah, there's plenty of other game systems that we're interested in playing, so we don't necessarily have to come back.
But it's here.
But it's here,
Yeah.
and I love all your characters. I just think they worked so well together, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun to sit back and watch as the game master.
Yeah,
Fun to be a part of.
awesome.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right.
Cool.
Fucking see ya.
That's it. Let's call it a wrap.
A police car and a screaming siren, pneumatic drill, ripped up concrete.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of our Into the Storm arc. If you're liking what you hear, tell a friend about it, write a goddamn review on Apple Podcasts, do whatever you can do to help us out and get the word out there. In the meantime, check us out online. We are at Nastygram on Instagram and Twitter. And the best place to interact personally with all the cast is at our Facebook page, the Nastygram RPG Lounge. Our intro music is by Wilhelm Scream. Scores once again by Adrian von Ziegler, and some new stuff from an awesome Finnish composer, Antti Martakainen. If you guys are missing Dean on this arc, go ahead and hop over to LSG Media. Listen to all their great stuff. He's on it all. LibertyStreetGeek.net. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you next week.
Days of speed and slow time Mondays. Pissing out with rain on a boring Wednesday. Watching the news and not eating your tea. Freezing conflict and death on the walls. I said that's entertainment. That's entertainment.
That's nasty.